Have you ever wondered what it would be like if the rulers of the universe were not distant and invisible, but walked, loved, fought, and schemed just as humans do? Imagine a world where the forces of thunder, sea, wisdom, love, and war are not faceless laws of nature, but living immortals who sit upon golden thrones, feasting, plotting, and watching us below. Welcome to Mount Olympus, the realm of the 12 Olympians, where divine power meets eternal rivalry, and immortality does not protect even gods from jealousy, pride, and ambition. Before we begin, a question for you. Where are you joining us from, and what time is it in your corner of the mortal world? Let us know in the comments, and as you hear these stories, imagine how the gods themselves might look down upon you at this very hour. The age of the Titans had ended. Zeus and his siblings had risen victorious from the ash of cosmic war, securing their dominion over heaven, earth, and sea. But the triumph of the Olympians did not bring stillness. It brought a new order filled with politics, passion, and rivalries that mirrored humanity itself. For at the heart of Greek mythology are not just grand battles, but the lives of the 12 Olympians, the gods and goddesses who defined religion, culture, and imagination for centuries. Let us step into their eternal court, beginning with Zeus, the king of gods, the master of thunder, and the ruler of the sky. Zeus was not merely a god of storms. He was the embodiment of order, law, and fate. His throne was said to gleam brighter than any on Olympus, carved with eagles and thunderbolts, symbols of his unmatched authority. Yet with all his power, Zeus was never without weakness. His endless affairs with goddesses, nymphs, and mortals alike produced countless children, heroes, kings, monsters, and demigods. These liaisons would spark rivalries among gods and fuel epics sung by mortals. To worship Zeus was to acknowledge the raw force of leadership, a power both protective and unpredictable. But no king reigns alone. At Zeus's side was Hera, his queen and sister, goddess of marriage and family. Hera's presence completed Olympus with both grace and wrath. Though honored as a protector of wives and mothers, Hera's myths reveal her as a force of jealousy and vengeance, often directed at the lovers and illegitimate children of Zeus. To mortals who broke vows of loyalty, Hera was merciless. Yet to those who upheld their oaths, she offered blessings of fertility and stability. Hera's rivalry with Zeus's paramours, like the mortal Semele, mother of Dionysus, or the goddess Leto, mother of Apollo and Artemis, made her one of the most fearsome deities of all. Her love for honor, her defense of her dignity, and her relentless pursuit of justice shaped not only divine politics, but the very idea of fidelity in Greek life. If Zeus and Hera embodied rule and order, then Poseidon embodied might and unpredictability. Brother of Zeus, god of the sea, Poseidon's trident shook both oceans and earth itself. His domain was vast, stretching beyond the horizon, commanding storms, earthquakes, and tidal waves. Mariners prayed to him for safe passage, while coastal cities built temples in his honor, knowing the price of his anger could be destruction. Yet Poseidon was not only destructive, he created horses, symbolizing both freedom and taming of wild power. His rivalry with Athena over the patronage of Athens is legendary. Poseidon offered a spring of salt water, while Athena gifted the olive tree, symbol of peace and prosperity. The people chose Athena, and Poseidon's fury rumbled in the sea for generations. In his temper and pride, Poseidon reflected the untamed spirit of nature itself. And there, seated high among her peers, was Athena, goddess of wisdom, strategy, and craft. Born from the very head of Zeus after he swallowed her mother Metis, Athena sprang forth fully armed, a warrior maiden who combined intelligence with strength. She represented not brute force, but calculated power, the general who wins wars with cunning rather than chaos. Cities revered her as a patron of order, law, and invention. Yet Athena was not without rivalry. she opposed Poseidon. She punished Arachne for her hubris in weaving, and she often took sides in mortal conflicts, most famously guiding Odysseus in his long journey home. To worship Athena was to embrace reason, balance, and the pursuit of excellence. Her image, carved in ivory and gold, stood tall in the Parthenon of Athens, one of the greatest wonders of the ancient world. But what of Apollo, the radiant god of light, music, prophecy, and healing? Apollo was among the most beloved of the Olympians, embodying harmony between body and spirit. His lyre played melodies that calmed even the most restless hearts, while his oracles spoke truths that shaped the destinies of kings and nations. At Delphi, the Pythia channeled his voice, uttering cryptic prophecies that mortals struggled to understand. Yet Apollo was not only gentle, he was a god of archery, his arrows swift and merciless when insulted. He punished the arrogant Niobe, who mocked his mother Leto by striking down her children. His rivalries extended even to love, as seen in his pursuit of Daphne, who transformed into a laurel tree to escape him. The laurel, ever after, became his sacred crown. Apollo embodied light, but his brightness often revealed shadows. Beside him stood his twin sister, Artemis, goddess of the hunt, wilderness, and the moon. Fierce and independent, Artemis roamed forests with her band of nymphs, untamed and untouched by marriage. She was a protector of young girls and animals, yet her wrath was quick and deadly. When Actaeon, a mortal hunter, stumbled upon her bathing, Artemis transformed him into a stag, and his own hounds tore him apart. She demanded respect and purity, and those who failed her paid dearly. Yet Artemis was also a bringer of comfort, guiding women through childbirth and offering protection in wild lands. Her duality, nurturer and punisher, made her one of the most complex Olympians. To her followers, she was freedom itself, unbound by the rules of man or god. At the forge of Olympus burned the fires of Hephaestus, god of blacksmiths, fire, and invention. Unlike his divine peers, Hephaestus was imperfect, born lame and cast from Olympus by Hera or by Zeus, depending on the myth. Yet through suffering, he found greatness, crafting weapons and armor of unparalleled beauty. It was Hephaestus who forged Zeus's thunderbolts, Achilles' armor, and the shield of Heracles. Despite his rejection, he returned to Olympus as a master craftsman, married to the goddess of love herself, though Aphrodite's heart strayed. Hephaestus' story is one of resilience, a god who, despite imperfection, proved indispensable. He embodied the dignity of labor and the triumph of creation through hardship. And here enters Aphrodite, goddess of love, beauty, and desire. Born either from the sea foam of Uranus's severed body or as a daughter of Zeus, Aphrodite's presence was irresistible. She held sway over gods and mortals alike, bending hearts with a mere glance. Yet her power was not always kind. It was consuming, uncontrollable, and often destructive. Her affair with Ares, the god of war, humiliated her husband Hephaestus and revealed the raw truth of desire, that it cannot be contained by law or loyalty. Aphrodite inspired tales of passion that shaped poetry, art, and philosophy, reminding mortals that love is both the sweetest gift and the most dangerous weapon. To resist her was nearly impossible. To embrace her was to risk ruin. The gods of Olympus were more than symbols. They were stories of human experience projected onto divine forms. They quarreled, loved, betrayed, and defended their honor. In their immortal conflicts, mortals found mirrors of their own lives. And as we continue to explore the pantheon, more figures emerge. Ares, the bloodthirsty god of war. Hermes, the swift messenger of the gods. Demeter, the nurturing goddess of harvest. Hestia, guardian of the hearth. And Dionysus, god of wine and ecstasy. Each played a role in shaping not only Olympus, but the very soul of Greek belief. From the stormy passions of Zeus and Hera to the cunning wisdom of Athena and the wild independence of Artemis, The Olympians stood as both rulers and reflections of human nature. But among them burned rivalries deeper than any mortal kingdom. Rivalries that would ignite wars, curse generations, and weave myths that echo even today. In the next chapter, we dive deeper into their conflicts: Ares versus Athena, Demeter's sorrow that shaped the seasons, and Hermes' mischievous rise as the cleverest of the gods. The gods of Olympus were more than distant figures. They were beings whose emotions spilled into the world of mortals, shaping destinies, wars, and even the cycles of nature itself. Among them, some burned with rivalry and conflict, while others brought gifts of peace, sustenance, and cunning. Let us turn to Ares, the god of war. If Athena embodied the strategy and wisdom of battle, then Ares was its chaos, the raw violence of bloodshed, the scream of soldiers in the heat of combat, the terror of a battlefield where reason is lost to rage. Ares was handsome and strong, yet his power inspired as much fear among gods as among mortals. Unlike Athena, who guided victorious generals and kings, Ares thrived in the storm of battle itself, delighting in the clash of swords and the river of blood. Even Zeus, his father, often scorned him, calling him destructive and hated among the gods. Yet mortals prayed to Ares for strength and courage, for in the end, no war could be won without fury. His affair with Aphrodite revealed another side to him, one of passion rather than violence. But even in love, Ares' presence was tempestuous. To the Greeks, Ares represented the unavoidable truth of human conflict, that war is not only strategy but also madness. But while Ares thrived on destruction, another Olympian gave life. Demeter, goddess of agriculture and harvest, was among the most revered deities, for she ensured survival itself. Fields of golden grain, orchards heavy with fruit, and the abundance of the earth were hers to bestow. Mortals honored her with festivals, offerings, and prayers, knowing that without her, famine could sweep through the land. Yet Demeter's story is not one of simple generosity. It is one of grief, loss, and renewal. The tale of Demeter and her daughter Persephone explains the very turning of the seasons. When Hades, lord of the underworld, abducted Persephone to be his queen, Demeter's sorrow was so great that the earth withered. Crops failed, animals starved, and humanity teetered on the brink of extinction. Only through negotiation with Zeus was a compromise reached. Persephone would spend part of the year in the underworld with Hades and part with her mother above. Thus, when Persephone descended, Demeter mourned and winter covered the land. When she returned, Demeter rejoiced, and spring brought life again. This myth was not just a story, but a sacred explanation of nature's cycles, linking divine drama with human survival. Demeter, in her sorrow and love, gave the Greeks one of their most enduring mysteries, the Eleusinian mysteries, rituals promising hope of life after death, inspired by her reunion with Persephone. From the deep grief of Demeter, the gods turn us toward lightness and mischief. Enter Hermes, the messenger of the gods, the trickster, the guide of travelers, and the patron of merchants, thieves, and storytellers. Hermes was swift, clever, and endlessly resourceful, wearing winged sandals that carried him across the skies and into the mortal world. Unlike many Olympians, Hermes was deeply connected to humanity. He moved easily between realms, carrying Zeus's decrees, leading souls to the underworld, and meddling in mortal affairs. His wit was unmatched. Even as a newborn, Hermes stole Apollo's cattle, only to charm his brother with the gift of the lyre, which he had crafted from a tortoise shell. Hermes embodied communication and movement. He presided over commerce, invention, and even language itself. For travelers, he was a protector. For thieves, an accomplice. For storytellers, an inspiration. His duality reflected the Greek understanding that cleverness could both save and deceive. Mortals saw in him the spark of ingenuity, the ability to bend rules, outwit rivals, and carve new paths. To call upon Hermes was to seek luck, speed, and cunning, gifts essential in both trade and survival. But while Hermes charmed with his cleverness, another goddess kept the home burning with quiet devotion. Hestia, goddess of the hearth and domestic life, was among the least dramatic yet most essential Olympians. She presided over the flame that warmed homes, cooked food, and united families. Every offering to the gods began with a prayer to Hestia, for the hearth was the sacred center of Greek life. Unlike her siblings, Hestia shunned conflict and rivalry, choosing peace over ambition. She remained a virgin goddess, dedicating herself not to passion or conquest, but to the steady flame of stability. Though often overlooked in myths, her importance in daily life was unparalleled. To honor Hestia was to honor the very foundation of civilization, the home. Yet Olympus was not only order and restraint. From its height spilled wild ecstasy, and that spirit belonged to Dionysus, the god of wine, revelry, and transformation. Dionysus was unlike any other Olympian, for he was born of both divinity and mortality, son of Zeus and the mortal Semele. His birth was extraordinary. When Semele perished, struck by Zeus's divine presence, Zeus sewed the unborn child into his thigh, carrying him to term. Thus Dionysus was twice born, a god who straddled boundaries between life and death, mortal and divine. Dionysus's power was intoxicating, liberating mortals from care and unleashing their hidden desires. His followers, known as Maenads, danced wildly in his honor, abandoning reason to commune with the divine. But Dionysus was not merely a god of pleasure. He was also one of transformation, representing the dual nature of joy and chaos. His myths often show him humbling kings who resisted him, proving that even the most powerful mortals could not deny the primal forces of ecstasy. The arrival of Dionysus into the pantheon completed the 12 Olympians, though lists sometimes varied. At times, Hestia ceded her place to him, reflecting the shifting nature of Greek worship. Yet whether 12 or 13, the Olympians embodied the full spectrum of human experience: love and jealousy, wisdom and folly, war and peace, creation and destruction. They were not simply gods, they were archetypes of existence itself. But what united them, beyond their powers and domains, was rivalry. For the Olympians were never at peace for long. Athena and Poseidon clashed for Athens. Hera and Zeus warred endlessly over his betrayals. Apollo and Artemis defended their mother against insults, unleashing vengeance upon mortals. Ares and Athena represented opposing visions of war. Even Hephaestus, mocked for his deformity, sought revenge by trapping his unfaithful wife Aphrodite, and her lover Ares in chains, exposing them to the laughter of the gods. These rivalries mirrored human society, reminding mortals that even in heaven, power bred conflict. The Olympians were a divine family bound by blood, yet divided by pride. They feasted together on ambrosia and nectar, yet beneath the laughter lay grudges, jealousies, and schemes. And as their conflicts unfolded, mortals found themselves swept into their dramas, chosen as pawns or champions in struggles far beyond their control. For the Greeks, this was not a flaw but a truth. Power is never simple, and even immortality cannot erase desire or rivalry. To tell the stories of the Olympians was to tell the story of humanity's own struggles for love, honor, survival, and meaning. Transition to part 3. As we move deeper into the myths of Olympus, we see how these rivalries shaped epic tales that defined the ancient world. The Olympians did not remain distant. They intervened in wars like that of Troy. They cursed the heroes like Heracles. They guided sailors like Odysseus, and they punished those who defied them. We descend into these legendary myths, where the Olympians revealed not only their power, but also their humanity, leaving a legacy that still echoes in our stories today. The Olympians were not distant deities who ignored the affairs of men. They intervened, shaped, and often controlled the destinies of mortals. weaving themselves into the great legends that have survived thousands of years. Their rivalry spilled over from Mount Olympus into the world of men, and nowhere is this more vividly seen than in the epic tales that define Greek mythology. Consider the Trojan War, perhaps the most famous conflict of the ancient world. Though waged by mortals, its outcome was determined as much by the Olympians as by the soldiers who fought upon the plains of Troy. The seeds of this war were sown in divine rivalry. When Eris, goddess of strife, cast a golden apple inscribed, "To the fairest among the goddesses at a wedding feast," 3 Olympians claimed it: Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite. Each sought to prove herself the most beautiful. And when Paris of Troy was chosen to judge, the goddesses did not hesitate to bribe him. Hera promised power, Athena promised wisdom and victory in war, but Aphrodite promised the love of the most beautiful mortal woman, Helen of Sparta. Paris chose Aphrodite, and in doing so, sealed the fate of his city. When Helen was taken to Troy, the Greeks sailed across the sea to reclaim her, and the Olympians took sides. Hera and Athena, furious at Paris's choice, supported the Greeks. Aphrodite, loyal to her promise, aided Paris and the Trojans. Apollo too lent his support to Troy, striking the Greek army with plague when Agamemnon dishonored his priest. On the battlefield, the gods themselves clashed, their rivalries mirrored in the struggles of mortal heroes. Ares fought beside the Trojans, while Athena guided the hand of Achilles. Poseidon rose from the sea to aid the Greeks, shaking the earth itself. The war became not only a contest of men, but of gods, each driven by pride, loyalty, or vengeance. The fall of Troy was not the end of divine intervention, for when Odysseus began his long journey home, it was the Olympians who determined his fate. Poseidon, angered by the blinding of his son, the Cyclops Polyphemus cursed Odysseus to wander for years, facing storm after storm upon the sea. Athena, however, favored him, offering counsel and aid, guiding him through the temptations of Circe, the lure of the sirens, and the horrors of Scylla and Charybdis. Hera and Zeus debated his fate, while Hermes delivered the messages that carried him from one trial to another. The story of Odysseus is not merely a tale of mortal endurance, it is a reminder that no man, however cunning, escapes the will of the gods. Yet the Olympians did not only influence kings and warriors. They also shaped the lives of heroes who walked the thin line between mortal and divine. Take Heracles, son of Zeus and a mortal woman, whose strength and courage became legendary. His life was marked by both glory and suffering, much of it inflicted by Hera's hatred for the child of her husband's infidelity. It was Hera who drove Heracles into a madness that caused him to slay his own family, a crime for which he was condemned to undertake his famous 12 labors. Each labor tested not only his might but his endurance of suffering, as he fought beasts like the Memmian lion. And the Hydra captured the Cyrenian hind and journeyed even to the underworld to bring back Cerberus. But even in these trials, the Olympians loomed. Athena offered her guidance, Hermes lent his aid, and at times even Apollo's oracle pointed the way. Heracles' story is one of divine punishment and divine favor intertwined, showing that the gods could both curse and bless, often at the same time. Through his labors, Heracles became a symbol of perseverance, embodying the paradox of the Olympians, that greatness often comes from suffering imposed by powers beyond our control. Not all mortals who crossed the gods were given such paths to glory. Consider Niobe, queen of Thebes, who mocked Leto, the mother of Apollo and Artemis, boasting that she was greater for having borne more children. Her arrogance or hubris sealed her doom. Apollo and Artemis descended upon her household and struck down her sons and daughters with arrows swift as lightning. Niobe's grief was so profound that she was transformed into stone, her tears forever flowing as a spring. The tale of Niobe reminded the Greeks of the danger of pride before the gods, who demanded respect above all else. Another mortal, Arachne, challenged Athena herself, claiming her weaving was greater than that of the goddess. When Athena wove scenes of divine power and Arachne wove scenes mocking the god's flaws, the goddess could not tolerate the insult. Though Arachne's skill was flawless, Athena struck her with shame, and Arachne hanged herself. In pity, Athena transformed her into a spider, condemning her to weave forever. This myth, too, reflected the rivalry between mortals and gods, and the dangers of believing one could surpass the divine. Yet rivalry was not only between gods and mortals. Among the Olympians themselves, conflict often erupted into open strife. When Hephaestus discovered Aphrodite's betrayal with Ares, he devised an unbreakable net of bronze and cast it over the lovers, exposing them before the laughter of the assembled gods. Though humiliated, neither Ares nor Aphrodite abandoned their passion. The tale revealed that even in divine realms, betrayal and humiliation cut as deeply as they did among mortals. And who could forget the quarrels of Zeus and Hera? Their marriage was a union of opposites, Zeus' unrestrained desire clashing with Hera as fierce demand for loyalty. Tales of their disputes filled the myths, from Hera's attempts to overthrow Zeus to her vengeance against his lovers and their children. Their marriage embodied the eternal tension between power and fidelity, authority and resistance. Mortals who looked to them saw both the sanctity of marriage and the storms that raged within it. The Olympians, though immortal, were not immune to fate. Even Zeus, king of the gods, was subject to the will of the Moirae, the Fates, who spun, measured, and cut the threads of life. This truth humbled even the most powerful, reminding all that destiny was beyond even divine control. When prophecies spoke, even gods listened. For Apollo's oracle at Delphi did not only guide mortals, it revealed truths to the Olympians themselves, truths they could not always escape. And yet, despite rivalries, betrayals, and grief, the Olympians endured together. They feasted on ambrosia, laughed in their halls, and ruled from the shining heights of Olympus. Their stories, passed from generation to generation, were not only tales of gods, but lessons for humanity, warnings against pride, encouragement for endurance, reminders of love's power and war's cost. For the Greeks, to worship the Olympians was not to expect perfection, but to recognize the divine in the very struggles of life itself. The gods were mirrors of humanity, magnified into immortality. Their rivalries were our rivalries, their passions our passions, their struggles our own. And so, as we conclude our journey through the lives, powers, and rivalries of the 12 Olympians, we must ask, why do these stories endure? Why do these immortal figures still speak to us across thousands of years? In Part 4, we will uncover their legacy, how their myths shaped Greek society, how their influence spread through art, literature, and philosophy, and how even today, in the modern world, the Olympians remain alive in our imagination. The stories of the 12 Olympians are more than myths. They are the foundation of an entire civilization's way of seeing the world. For the Greeks, the gods were not abstractions. They were woven into every part of life, into politics, agriculture, war, art, and philosophy. The Olympians were the explanation for thunder and storms, the promise of fertile harvests, the reason for victory in battle, and the cause of defeat. They lived not only in temples and sacrifices, but in the imagination of every poet and every family who lit a fire upon their hearth. The Olympians also shaped values. To honor Zeus was to honor justice and leadership. To honor Hera was to respect loyalty, even when it demanded vengeance. To worship Athena was to pursue wisdom and skill, while devotion to Ares was to embrace the courage of warriors. Aphrodite reminded mortals of the irresistible power of love, while Demeter connected them to the cycles of life and death. Dionysus offered release from the burdens of reason, and Hestia preserved the sanctity of home. Hermes taught cunning and resourcefulness. Hephaestus showed the dignity of labor, And Apollo and Artemis revealed balance between light and shadow, reason and wilderness. Together, the 12 Olympians embodied the full spectrum of existence. Their influence extended beyond Greece. As Greek culture spread through colonization and conquest, and later through the empire of Alexander the Great, so too did the Olympians. Rome would adopt them, renaming Zeus as Jupiter, Hera as Juno, Aphrodite as Venus, and Ares as Mars. Their stories were retold in Latin, their images carved into marble, their temples raised across Europe. Even as empires rose and fell, the Olympians endured, their myths echoing in new tongues and new lands. The legacy of the Olympians also lives in art and literature. Homer's Iliad and Odyssey immortalized their roles in war and adventure. Hesiod's Theogony recounted their rise from chaos and their triumph over the Titans. Tragedians like Euripides and Sophocles placed their will at the heart of human suffering and redemption. Sculptors gave them form in stone, painters captured them on vases, and architects built temples that still stand as testaments to their worship. The Parthenon of Athens, dedicated to Athena, remains one of the greatest symbols of human achievement, linking artistry with divinity. But perhaps their greatest legacy is not in temples or texts, but in the imagination itself. The Olympians represent universal truths, that power breeds rivalry, that love brings both joy and sorrow, that wisdom and war are forever intertwined, that life and death follow one another in an eternal cycle. They endure because they are not perfect beings. They are reflections of humanity, its own flaws and virtues magnified into immortality. Even today, their names linger in our language, our planets, our stories. We speak of Herculean strength, drawn from Heracles. We call sudden rage martial from Mars, the Roman Ares. Companies bear the names of Hermes, Nike, and Apollo. Artists and writers continue to find inspiration in their myths, retelling them in novels, films, and television. The Olympians may no longer be worshipped with sacrifice and prayer, but they remain alive in culture, symbols of forces that never vanish. And so we return to the shining peaks of Mount Olympus, where the gods sit in council, feasting and laughing, quarreling and scheming. Zeus lifts his thunderbolt, Hera sharpens her glare, Athena holds her spear of wisdom, and Apollo's lyre plays softly in the background. Around them gather their immortal kin, each embodying a piece of the human soul. They are eternal, not because they are flawless, but because they are us, our desires, our fears, our loves, our rivalries, given immortal form. The 12 Olympians ruled not with cold perfection, but with passion. And in their rivalries and alliances, in their blessings and curses, they became unforgettable. To study them is not only to learn about the past, but to look into the mirror of humanity itself. And now, traveler, your journey through Olympus comes to an end, at least for today. If the stories of the gods stirred something within you, do not let it fade into silence. Cast your offering not upon the altar, but here in the mortal realm. Strike the like button as though wielding Zeus's thunderbolt. Share this tale as Hermes would carry a message across the world, and subscribe to join us again in the halls of myth and memory. Tell us, from what land and at what hour did you join this tale? Are you watching in the brightness of Apollo's sun, or beneath the silver glow of Artemis's moon? Leave your words below, so that the gods themselves may know where their legends still live. Until our next gathering, may Athena guide your wisdom, Poseidon calm your storms, and Hestia keep your hearth burning bright. For though mortals pass, the Olympians remain, eternal upon Olympus.